Commence our next session, and we would like to invite everyone to be seated. I have Miss Andrea Leland, who should need no introduction to many of us, as she is a noted film documentalist, and her presentation will be looking at the issue of the challenges of video and documenting indigenous culture. She will speak more about her work, and I now turn you over to Andrea. Speak here? Yeah, no problem. Lights.
I'm just going to sit here. Is this on? Check. Check. Can you hear me? No. All right. You want me to stand up? This one.
All right. Please give Miss Leland a round of applause, welcoming her to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear? I guess you can hear me because I. Okay, I'm going to sit down for my presentation, if that's okay. Since it's the afternoon, it's a little more casual. And I think what I want to say to introduce my paper. I'm not really a paper writer. I'm a filmmaker. But Zoila asked me to write a paper, and I came up with a title. The title of which is Outsider and Insider Collaboration, Documentation, and Filmmaking in a Virtual World. So I will address some of that, but for the most part I'm going to talk about my process as a filmmaker. And one thing I have to say is that it's been a very interesting afternoon for me to listen to all these papers. So my role as a filmmaker is to take all this information that I've heard today and the facts that I hear from scholars or that I read about, combine that with what I hear from the man on the street or the woman on the street, and try to synthesize that into a film that is understandable, that is educational, informative, engaging, not only to the people who I am documenting, but to people who know nothing about the culture which I'm documenting. So it's a challenge for sure. So this paper is about how I go about doing that. J. Ruby, anthropologist, has said, quote, "Visual anthropology logically proceeds from the belief that culture is manifested through visible symbols embedded in gestures, ceremonies, rituals, and artifacts situated in constructed and natural environments. Visual anthropology places these artifacts within a holistic cultural context. I place my work within the context of visual anthropology. I do so with the understanding that I am trained as an artist and not as a scientist. I'm a film and video maker involved in the creative process while exploring, celebrating, and documenting distinct cultures. The goal of my film and video work is to enrich and enlighten, also to increase tolerance and decrease fear and tension between cultures. I work collaboratively with members of these individual communities, providing a forum to voice their untold stories, personal challenges, and compelling triumphs. Social, artistic, and political actions are placed within the context of the culture, asking the viewer to confront old myths and discover a new perspective. This is my process as a visual anthropologist and my mission as an artist. Richard Leacock, the well-known visual anthropologist, looked for ways and means that would allow the camera to function as an unblinking observer and allow the stories to tell themselves, to convey, as he was fond of saying, the feeling of being there. However, while it is true that the camera can seem to act as a fly on the wall, there are certain underlying issues that must be recognized. Again, J. Ruby says, in a post-positive and postmodern world, the camera is constrained by the culture of the person behind the apparatus. That is, films, photographs are always concerned with two things: the culture of those filmed and the culture of those who do the filming. Welcome. It is my opinion that documentary filmmaking is not objective at all, but rather is the most subjective form of filmmaking. In the process of collecting footage, the filmmaker chooses what images to capture in the frame of a camera and chooses what to leave out of the frame. In editing, choices are also made as to what to include and exclude. The images, both captured and edited, tell the story the filmmaker wants to tell. Several filmmakers can attend a specific event, collect footage, and ultimately tell very different stories. One could just let the camera run for 15 minutes and present the footage as cinema verite, also known as the fly-on-the-wall approach, although the filmmaker chooses very carefully which 15 minutes to capture. Another could cut up the images, remove the sound, add a total narration over the footage, showing only certain footage and telling the audience what the filmmaker wants the audience to know. Whereas these are extreme examples, many filmmakers will do some combination of both. In the case of Nanook of the North, Robert Flaherty, who is considered the father of documentary filmmaking, reconstructed scenes to give the audience an idealized view of his subjects. All these forms of filmmaking can be engaging and informative, but cannot necessarily be regarded as, quote, the truth. Taking into consideration varying viewpoints around visual anthropology and documentary filmmaking styles, I developed a system that works for me. I call it insider-outsider collaboration, and it really is a dialogue. The result of this dialogue is more than what either one could have achieved alone. As an outsider, I can choose to document the ordinary, such as a mother braiding a young girl's hair, a pot on the stove, or a recipe for fish soup. Often when I'm collecting this kind of footage, the community member will be amused by the object of my attentions, and perhaps will see the same object in a different light as a result of my attention. I collaborate with the insider who will point out an important person from whom I must collect an oral history that I would otherwise not know about. Through this process, I engage the community in the creation of the film. This is not to say that I please all the people all the time. There can be healthy differences of opinion and result in heated discussions. For example, in The Garifuna Journey, which is a film I'll be showing here tomorrow, which I completed in 1996, some felt that one of the characters in the film was too country, was not sophisticated enough to represent the community. I felt the same individual had a lot of heart and soul, and she was perfect for this segment in question, so I left her in the film. In another section, I was asked to edit out a woman dancing with a beer bottle at the Garifuna Settlement Day celebration. And I did remove this segment, because the community felt that it was just reinforcing stereotypes of the event being a party, rather than explaining the importance of the event as a historical reenactment of survival. Mutually agreed upon solutions result in most cases. My primary responsibility is to the community that I am documenting, and it is my hope that the film will reach a wider audience and in some small way bridge the gap between the community and the public at large. So, as I was saying, especially in this next film, the Euromane film, which is what I'm working on now, I take my responsibility, very seriously. And so listening to what was said today, and all the myths about the the colonial version of history. I have to be really careful when I put this next film together to make sure that I don't reinforce those stereotypes or that colonial history. And there was one other example that Melanie brought up, which is that in the Griffin Journey, I also mentioned that the Africans came before Columbus. And many students and scholars, and usually many people who see the film, always ask me about that. And the point is that my informant, the person I was documenting, that was his belief. And who is it for me to judge to say, I wasn't going to censor that. That was his belief, so I included that in the film. And actually, it's a good point for discussion afterwards with students. Let me take a breath. My journey with the Garifuna community. In 1980, as a graduate student at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, and prior to any work or formal knowledge of anthropology, I decided to travel to the Caribbean to look at how the visual arts manifested themselves in Caribbean culture. I was interested in the layers of culture, African, European, and Amerindian, and how the visual arts reflected this layering. What were the sources of inspiration for these artists? I was looking at self-identified artists as well as those who made objects but did not call themselves artists. I was particularly interested in visiting an island whose main economy did not depend on tourism, and St. Vincent became my destination. The result of this exploration was an article published in the Caribbean Review in 1985, and one of the subjects of my film was Dinks. Not my film, my article was Dinks, whose work is downstairs, so if he's here, I would certainly like to meet up with him. While on island, I heard about a group of people who had resisted colonialism. They were considered backward, aggressive, and not too friendly. I heard that the majority of these, quote, black Caribs were shipped off to Central America somewhere. Any inquiries I made resulted in vague answers. I was discouraged from visiting the Caribs who still lived on St. Vincent in Sandy Bay. I went anyway to find out for myself, but I didn't get very far, and indeed I was not welcomed. I was unable to make any inroads at that time into the community. Nevertheless, this experience was very important to me, and I never forgot it. After I left the island, I returned to Chicago, continued my education, and graduated with a master's in fine arts, and began my work that focused on Afro-Caribbean culture. This involved working with various audio and video projects in Haiti, Chiapas, Nevis, New Orleans, Toronto, etc. During this time, I began to develop the collaborative style of filmmaking. 2 films currently in distribution resulted from these collaborations, including Voodoo in the Church in Haiti, which I finished in 1989, and The Long Road Home, which I finished in 1992. In comparison to today, the production of Voodoo and the Church in Haiti was a cumbersome project. There was a lot of letter writing that went back and forth with no responses, a lot of travel back and forth between Chicago and Haiti. At that time, there was no internet, no Google, no easy way to get information. But fortunately, I lived near the Northwestern University, and the Africana Library was available to me because the head of the library, Dr. Panofsky, was my neighbor in Illinois, where I lived. Haiti had just seen Baby Doc leave power, and the island was in transition. Bob Richards, who was my partner at the time, and I were able to get the blessings and the assistance from the Bureau of Ethnography in Haiti. And they assisted in the collection of material by providing us with an interpreter and a guide, Abuja, who became a central character in our film. He introduced us to local Hungan, or voodoo priests, and took us to Hunfor, which are voodoo temples, all over the island. The politicians in Haiti wanted to change the country's image now that Baby Doc and Papa Doc were gone. We offered to assist by demystifying voodoo and we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. After the initial collection of footage and the first draft of the film, we took the film back to Haiti for feedback. Tradition bearers in Haiti told us what was missing and arranged for us to attend a voodoo ceremony, which we filmed and which became an important part of the final film. The film was made using a Bolex 16mm film that you had to wind up every 18 seconds. Never having formally studied documentary filmmaking and using National Geographic television programs as my reference point, we decided to place a narration over most of the scenes in the film. This is not a style I would continue to use. Today, if I have to use a narrator, it will be someone from the community speaking for the community, rather than using a narrator as a distant observer. I've made a choice not to include myself as narrator, although this might change. If I do include it, it will only be for the purpose of making the film more cohesive. My presence behind the camera as a videographer and in making choices in the edit room makes my voice clear enough. In the back of my mind, I was still thinking about the group of people who had been exiled from St. Vincent, wondering how their culture had survived and what form it took in the diaspora. Coincidentally, in 1994, Bob Richards was in Belize photographing on a separate project. He called me to say that the people I had been talking about for many years were right there in front of him, and I needed to come down as soon as possible. I met him in Dangriga in Belize during Garifuna Settlement Day, and the images I captured that day became the opening sequence of my film, The Garifuna Journey. This event was my introduction to the Garifuna community that I was interested in learning about for many years. Upon our return to Chicago, we met Rodel Castillo, a Garifuna tradition bearer who was born in Belize and had come to live in Chicago. He introduced us to the National Garifuna Council in Belize. We went before them to ask permission to make a film about the community, and we used voodoo in the church in Haiti as our representation of our style. I think the council members felt our treatment of voodoo as a traditional religion was fair, and they believed that we could be trusted to present their culture with respect. And that's how the Garifuna Journey came to be made. The film premiered at the Field Museum in Chicago in 1996 during a weekend highlighting Garifuna culture. Watching the Garifuna community see themselves and their friends and relatives on the big screen was one of the highlights of my career. There was a lot of laughing and crying and oohs and ahs. It was clear that the experience of seeing themselves being portrayed respectfully and in depth was a really positive experience for everybody concerned. For this event, the museum staff brought tradition bearers from Belize, and the museum turned into a festive Garifuna event, which included music, dance, traditional foods, panel discussions, etc. The Garifuna Journey went on from there to many film festivals being worldwide, and is now being distributed by New Date Films. Following the completion of that film, I continued to work in visual documentation of Caribbean culture, and in 2001, I completed a short documentary about a Garifuna midwife and healer in Belize and her daughter who lives in Chicago. And in 2006, I completed James E. King of Scratch, which is about the traditional music of the Virgin Islands. That brings me to my current project, Uramain, the film I'm working on now. It was really not anything I had planned to do. In 2005, I was invited by Zoila to present the Garifuna Journey at the St. Vincent during National Heroes Day. I presented the film in small villages around the island, and I was not prepared for the reaction. People who saw the movie became very emotional when they saw the film and the culture that they had lost. They wept and said, "We have no culture, it was all lost." And I said, "Of course you have culture. You just have a different one from the one that you see on the screen." And then I picked up a camera and began to collect video to show them the culture they did have and to hear the stories they told me about their own history, not the history that the colonial English had written in their history books. I really didn't think I would make a film. I thought I would just give the raw footage to the Center for Black Music Research in Chicago, where the rest of my where all of my footage has been archived. But there are several things that led me to make a film. One is Dr. Palacio. I met up with him in Atlanta at another conference and told him I had this footage, and he really encouraged me to pursue another film. And also, other people that I would like to recognize in the audience that really have helped me collect the footage so far. Ross Jacob, who's sitting in the back there, was my driver, the person who was driving me around St. Vincent to show these films. And we became friends. He knows his history very well, and he took me around to people, other local people, local historians who knew their history, and I began to document them. And on this trip coming back, both Jacob and his wife Empress have been extremely helpful. They've donated their time to me to take me around to collect more footage. And they also introduced me to Doc Adams, who is another person in my film. So I want to acknowledge them. And also Dr. Gill, who's been very instrumental in telling the story. So I haven't really, with this Euromane film, I realized after coming to this conference, I really haven't included a lot of scholars in the film. I want the information to be correct, but I really feel like the story has to come from the people who live in the culture, rather than just who study the culture, even though you live in the culture too, but I think I'm looking for that voice. In the production, editing, and distribution of this film, I've incorporated into my process many of our internet-enabled world, which was previously unavailable to me. My editor and the person I'm working with on animation live in San Francisco. Whereas I work with the editor one-on-one, the animator and I are working remotely. We communicate through email and use a Dropbox software program to send images back and forth. Greg Palacio is an artist, Griffin artist who lives in Los Angeles, and he's illustrating several sequences that will be animated. We also communicate via email and Dropbox. I send segments of the interviews to community members for translation, send rough cuts for comments, receive emails, and links to artists' websites who I'm considering for soundtracks or further animation and so forth. So in one way, the making of this film is even more collaborative as more members of the community can comment and offer suggestions on a regular basis through the internet. Another major difference in the making of this film is that we're building a base of support before the film is complete. With the assistance of Hussein Castillo, a 28-year-old Garifuna son of Rodel Castillo, we're establishing a social network presence on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Garifuna audiences worldwide, literally, are being made aware of this film as it progresses. Challenges remain working in the Garifuna community in the Caribbean and Central America. I thought the internet here would be slow, but it isn't. St. Vincent seems to have a pretty good internet system, but I live much of the year in the Virgin Islands, and it's not very good there. It's very hard to download images and things like that, so that's still a challenge. Another major challenge in making a film today is the technology. Each new edition of camera requires its own set of tapes, editing equipment, and digital support technology. And the cameras are always changing, the editing equipment is changing. Learning how to use the equipment for each new technology is a major task in itself, not to mention the additional cost required to purchase the material. So for example, when I was on Baliso, the footage I originally shot for this film was not in HD, it's in a mini DV form, digital form, but all the footage that was collected on Baliso by SVG TV was in HD. So if I'm to get their footage, I have to convert it to mini DV. So it's complicated and difficult, and it'll look different, but hopefully everybody will be able to deal with that when the film is done. Archiving has also become very complicated. What format should a digital image be stored in, and how stable is the material in a digital environment? There's an ongoing discussion about this question with no single conclusion. I'm encouraged to see in this highly technological world the potential for Garifuna community to tell their own stories. And in fact, really, that's the purpose, another goal of my filmmaking is to have people in the community pick up their own cameras and tell their own stories. I believe this started to happen in Belize after the Garifuna Journey came out. But I can see that in this technological world, there's a huge potential for these stories to be told. iPhones, smaller affordable cameras, computer editing, and websites make the production and distribution of films much easier. The Garifuna Research Center's website could be a clearinghouse for films made throughout the world, wherever Garifuna live. For example, a call could be sent out for films about cassava. Someone in Central America might make a short film demonstrating the way they make cassava. Someone in New York might make a short film about the memory of the first time they ate cassava. And someone in St. Vincent might make another film with their recipe for cassava, and so forth. All of these films, short films, could be posted on a website, and in this way, the Garifuna culture can be preserved and presented in a virtual world. In summary, there's no single correct way to make a documentary that positively identifies the film as a visual anthropology film. I've tried various techniques using a variety of equipment, employing a diverse section of camera people and editors, which I might add, whenever I do work with a community, I usually do try to meet a camera person and pick up crew wherever I go. In this case, I've been introduced to a gentleman named Fabian Guerra, and he's been traveling around with me collecting footage with his beautiful camera, and he's doing this gratis or deferred payment, assuming I'm able to raise some funds to pay him. I've tried various techniques. Oh, I said that already. Over the years, I've developed a style that includes insider and outsider collaboration, resulting in a healthy dialogue. What I've learned is that you have to be resourceful and face the challenges of working with very, very limited funding. Finding people in the community who can help give you in-kind support if they're not willing to help you, if they're not willing to come up with funds. And finally, you must have perseverance and patience to complete a film. And I might add, you have to sort of override individual preferences within a community. There'll always be someone from your community, from the community that you are documenting, who mistrusts your motivation and puts obstacles in your way, and you never really know why. A lot of times it could be political considerations, which I really have to try not, which I don't get involved with political considerations. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, technician, and thank you very much, Andrea. That was very good.
Thank you.
And my apologies. I'm filling in for Gene. He had to step out because he has an emergency. But I was also taking some pictures downstairs, and you can check out the drumming also. That's very fantastic. All right, so I guess this is where we go to the film itself now.
No, I'm not showing the film today. I'm not showing any film today. I'm just delivering a paper as I was told to do. So, sorry. Tomorrow is the day that I will show the Garifuna Journey, and I do have a rough cut of Uramane, but really after today I'm a little hesitant to show it, really.
Well, at least she's being honest.
Yeah. But I wouldn't, especially to a large group, I wouldn't mind showing it. If you want to approach me and ask me individually, I'd be happy to show you part of it. I do want feedback on it, and there's no animation in it yet, you know, but the structure is there. But anyway, so maybe tomorrow, a few minutes.
Okay. So, anyone
Any
would like
questions?
to ask questions?
I want to thank you for your commitment and your courage to be a part of this program. You are real.
Thank you.
To me, I think you already got it. But I want to
Your mic isn't on.
I thank you, but I guess you did it.
Yeah.